Prajwal, welcome to the table.
Thank you, Gary.
To start the interview, I'd like to ask about how you became aware of photography as a medium.
So I can't really go back too deep into my own history uh, as a photographer because I didn't really grow up with a family with an abundance of cameras. Uh, I come from a really humble background, so I remember my family having a tiny Japanese point and shoot film camera that we used exclusively for either festivals or picnics, and then it just used to stay in our cupboard for the rest of the year. So I remember using that once, and the other memory I have of the camera is taking it apart and destroying it, and then keeping the parts in my cabinet, because that's the other thing that I'm known for in my family is to break things open and then collect them, sort of like a cabinet of curiosities.
Mm-hmm.
So that's parallel to my childhood, where I used to just go around and find objects and collect them, and I think that's my personal history background. And then I discovered photography uh, as a thing that I would want to pursue after I got my first phone, which I got as an award from Nokia. So I had an N95 5 megapixel camera, and I used to shoot everything, as bees, flowers, and rivers, boats, everything. But then that's a that's actually what inspired me to start photography.
Mm-hmm.
Is the camera itself that I had in my hand, and then I could collect everything, anything, and then save it for myself. And then when I once went out to print the photographs, the person who prints, the person from the lab told me that you've got a good eye. And then I really took it to myself. I believe that he was telling me the truth, and that's how I started photography. And then a year later, my family helped me get a camera,
Mm-hmm.
a Canon 450D. So I used to use that and my kitchen dining table to shoot insects, bugs, fruits, lemon, anything that's around me, and collect the images. And I really used to like how light and shadows interacted, even as I started photography, and that's what really inspired me to begin using it as a form of expression, or even a form of spending my time.
I'm curious. I also used to love pulling things apart, but then they usually got thrown out because they weren't very useful anymore. And I was particularly spectacularly bad at putting them back together to work.
Same.
Right, I was wondering. Our family was very similar in that we had a 126 camera, which only came out for special occasions, and a roll of film could actually be over about 3 years. And that was the first camera I also used, which I took to school and made what could be called perfectly horrendous photos of my peers, lacking in contrast and everything else. Tell us about your journey. You've talked about how you got the camera, firstly the phone and then the 450, and you started to self-learn. How did it go from that to where you are now? What was the process that you put yourself through to get better?
So on the surface, it's just shooting every single day,
Mm-hmm.
and having my camera with me every single day wherever I go. It didn't really matter. So I never left my camera home, and so I think you probably noticed that I come out as a quite reserved person when I first meet someone. So that's how my photography is as well, because it takes me time and effort to actually open up to take pictures of a new place or people in that place. So I started, as I told you, I started taking pictures of objects, and then I started going out and taking pictures of people. But then I started with a 7300
Ooh.
lens, and mostly at 300 mils, because I couldn't go close to people and take the pictures, and it took me a lot of effort to take the camera out of my bag, even because it's. I mean, it would give me a lot of anxiety, but then it was sort of like a meditation, like a practice. So shooting every single day, I grew more comfortable, and then after 7300, I started using a 50, the nifty 50 lens, and then after that, I got a Nikon 1J1, of the first Nikon mirrorless camera that's discontinued now, and with a 10 millimeter lens, which was equivalent to 28 mils, and using that lens was what actually helped me as a street photographer, helped my composition and lighting skills, and that's around the same time where I even grew better as a black and white photographer, and and later I transitioned to a Fujifilm with around the same focal length, and I think shooting 28 was one of the things that helped me grow as a photographer, and so now I'm in Melbourne, and it's I'm starting again. That's the same thing, starting again.
I find it interesting because the first phone cameras were about 27, 28 mil, and it's been quite intriguing watching phone photography because it has been that focal length since the beginning, and now we've got a little bit of play with it with a 15 and a 58 or 55 or thereabouts. Now, you've come to Australia to further your education in photography. Can you tell us a little bit about the motivations for that and the process of coming here?
So, I think coming here has a lot of backstory, along with just wanting to do my master's in creative arts. So one of the major things that happened in my life and in everybody's life was COVID. So before COVID happened, I was working as a production designer in a feature film, and we were traveling in remote areas of Nepal, and so we were traveling for a stretch of 6 months, 4 months at a stretch, and shooting in a village and staying there, living with all the crew and cast members and some villagers, and so it was and then COVID hit, and then a lot of things changed. I couldn't work as free anymore, and then there were less work. There was I used to get one job in a couple of months, and that's all I got. And then staying at home a lot of time, definitely, obviously, started giving me all sorts of anxiety, and then started questioning my life. And then I met my partner, and then we decided to move here for a change, and then start anew, and then let's see what we can do from here. So it's like we both moving away from the place and trying to start afresh.
Sounds good. So you're doing your master's now or doing a bachelor now?
Now I'm doing my master's in creative arts.
Excellent. Excellent. Who are your photographic heroes, or are they cinematic heroes? Having worked in cinema.
Having worked in, it's really interesting because even though my professional background is cinema, I don't come from a film school per se. So I come from a fine art background, and that's how I made my way into the film as an art director and a production designer, and then I started practicing other roles in a film. So my experience as a photographer, as a filmmaker, doesn't stem from a film school, and so I can't say that my photography is inspired by any cinema, but there are some photographers and artists and filmmakers that I hold as an inspiration. So it's a very cliche photographer inspiration, but I've been very much inspired by Cartier-Bresson,
Mm.
and reading his decisive moment, and then looking at his black and white street photography images, and that was really inspiring for me when I was just starting out as a photographer. And also, I've also been inspired by works from artists like Van Ho, and even filmmakers like the filmmaker that directed Amélie.
Oh, yeah. Can't remember his name.
Jean-Pierre.
Not sure. Love the film though,
Yeah, yes.
and love the
yes.
sequel.
And
That's
I
the follow-up film.
followed all his films, not all, but a lot of his films. Like there was Delicatessen
Mm.
or Delicatessen. So it was his works was really inspiring as well for me as a photographer. Even
You know he's a good director when Jodie Foster will play a role with one line. In the film After Emily, she played a flower seller and she's got one line in French. And you don't even notice her until afterwards. You go, oh my God, I think that was Jodie Foster.
do you remember the name of the film?
No.
Maybe.
Is William Klein, Morimoto, Iko Jose, and that group of photographers an influence? Because they seem to have a similarity to your style.
To be honest, not really. I've only got to learn about William Klein during my master's, to be
Mhm.
honest, so recently. And see, I come from a completely different background, schooling, so it's only later in my life that I started exploring about other international artists that practice photography. And so in my beginning days it was all just me experimenting. So I'm still learning about what's out there and what's been out there in the photography world.
Curious, going back to your fine arts background. In Nepal, what did you learn in fine arts? Who were the artists that were put forward as should be influential on you?
It's so we did focus a lot on South Asian artists,
Mm-hmm.
but then still our art schooling still really bases the inspirations mostly from Western European art movements.
Mm-hmm.
So we were taught about artists like Picasso and Dali, and so from that school, from Renaissance. So not really much from our own culture, but it's I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate. We still had to learn more from the Western European art culture than our own
Mm-hmm.
history.
Yeah, I find that interesting in that Nepal has quite a complex and interesting art history,
It does.
and it seems a very sad waste not to teach the students about it, because to bring that into the contemporary I find very fascinating, having worked in China for a long time, for a couple of years, and seeing how Chinese artists take the whole of Chinese history and take what the West has been doing and then synthesize and play with it to make new meanings that are actually interesting, in that to a Chinese audience it means one thing, but to a Western audience it is completely different.
Yeah, yeah. Now, when I see works from newer artists that come from art schools from Nepal, I see more and more artists and students themselves, exploring their own background, their own culture, and bringing inspirations and works from there. So
Mhm.
it's good to see that even though the schooling doesn't really include a lot of ideas from our own history. The individual artists and students are starting to explore it by themselves. So that's a positive.
What areas of photography would you like to inhabit as time goes by?
I think I need an explanation of
As
that
in,
question.
do you want to be commercial arts? What sort of subject areas? What sort of clients would you like to have?
So most of my life, I was really possessive
Mhm.
about my photography. I spent like 13, 15 years holding it so dear that I didn't really want to make it professional at all.
Mhm.
And I have had to shoot for money sometimes, but it took a lot of me. So it took a lot of effort and a lot of pain to actually do it. So I still am not sure if I really want to make my photography commercial.
Mhm.
But I would still want to continue working as an artist,
Mhm.
and I would love to collaborate with other artists and galleries, as long as I'm not creating for someone else.
Mhm. Tell me about how you approach your work now, because you've talked about coming from this art background, wanting to stay in art. So when you decide you're going out to photograph, how do you approach that in your head in terms of almost philosophically when you go out?
To begin with, I don't really go out planning to take photographs.
Mhm.
I just have my camera with me all the time, every single day, and so photography as a practice for me is very intuitive, and it's something I can't and don't plan.
Mhm.
So it's just yeah, it's very intuitive. I think that's very self-explanatory.
What themes interest you? For example, if you look at the broad base of my work, in the end it's all about what is a man? How is a man supposed to behave? Who is allowed to be accepted as one? How can I disrupt that whole process of mediarization and media saying this hegemony is acceptable, these people are not acceptable, and in my work I'm constantly trying to level that playing field. That's my burning question. I'm kind of curious as to what your burning question is
Wow.
in terms of the why of you making photographs.
I just do it for my peace of mind.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think about anything,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't aim to do anything with it. It's what peace of mind.
Explain a little bit further the peace of mind.
So it's not good to self-diagnose, but I have a lot of anxiety all the time, especially after I moved here. It's really hard to do anything because of my anxiety, and photography really helps me. I go out, I have my camera with me, and if I see something and I engage with it, I take some pictures. I think it helps me distract
Mm-hmm.
for some time. I think it's kind of distraction for me as well.
Mm-hmm. Is it a lovely thing to hide behind if you need to at, say, a party or a big event?
That's a really good point. I wouldn't have thought about it if you didn't say it, but that's exactly what I do sometimes because I cannot go to parties. I'm not a party person.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot enjoy a lot of people and noise. But then if I'm working or if I'm taking pictures, but that's I can isolate myself from everything else, and I can completely focus and engage in what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Even in big festivals in Nepal, I don't like crowd. It makes me really I can't breathe in a crowd. But then, if I'm taking pictures, I can completely separate myself from the crowd and just be an observer and create and not worry about anything.
I use photography a lot to decompress from stress. That if I grab my camera, I go out there somewhere, or I have a portrait shoot, or almost anything, afterwards I will feel better. It drops my endorphins, something big time, much more than most other things. And I completely relate to where you're coming from with that. William Young, the Sydney photographer, often said that he was invisible when he was at parties. But he was invisible because he was Chinese, but he was also invisible behind his camera. Which meant that he got photos and was willing to make photos when no one else was willing to make them. And I have seen some that people would rather not actually have in existence. I know I've stopped William once from a photograph that was, well, I'd like to have on my wall now, but when I was 27, no. At a party. One of the questions I'm really fascinated with photographers is we all have different relationships with our gear and our cameras. Talk about your relationship with your gear. Is it important what it is? And how did you come about choosing the cameras that you have?
I think, however much I stress about gear not being important, it's just about taking pictures with whatever you have. For me, from my experience, it's quite important to have a gear that's sort of fits your style, and fits your comfort. So I can give you a very good example of that from my experience. So when I was in China in 2017 for a documentary photography residence, I had a Fujifilm X10 with me, which was a very small 4x cropped compact camera that I had started using for street photography, and I was falling in love with it. And then when I got selected to be one of the 4 photographers from Nepal to go to China, I was so nervous that maybe my camera wouldn't be enough. And so I borrowed a Nikon full frame camera from my friend. And so I went to China and I found this hip hop artist who I decided to follow for my project. And so I went to their place and spent a few days with them, taking pictures and everything. And I come back and I hate the pictures. There's no soul in them. It's like a documentary. Even though I was doing a documentary project, I didn't really want it to be a documentary. I wanted to be something I would take, and it was nothing close. And so then I decided to just pack the full frame camera and then do whatever I do best. And then I took my Fuji and then set everything to black and white and just went back to my comfort zone, to be honest. And then I started loving the pictures, and it really, that level of ergonomic, not just physically but mentally and creatively, was what I felt at that time, and my Fuji really helped me. And I think that really taught me that I think it's really important to have a gear that you can fall in love with, to be able to do what you really do and what you really want to do.
I completely agree, and it was really interesting in the 90s, the Nikons and the Hasselblad. So easy, just fell into my hand. When Fuji came along, the XT series, or XE series for me, suddenly it was like my FM, and everything was in the right place. And I just went, yeah, baby, I'm back. I'd used a Canon prior to that, and I found it, I love the photos out of it. I love the files. It's like the Sony, I love the files. But from a put it in my hand and use it, the Sony I love most with my 35mm Voigtlander, which is a manual focus lens. And we are now talking to each other. and there's a certain synchronicity that happens between gear and photographers. I would suggest you go back and look at your Nikon photos again. Take them. Are they RAWs?
I need to really take, but I believe there are raw files.
If they're RAW files, take them into Lightroom and change the colours, because the colours straight out of cameras, particularly in Lightroom, are awful.
But I shot black and white, so.
Okay, so there should no. If you shot RAWs, you shot everything,
Yeah.
and you've got everything.
Definitely.
Yeah. Also, next question. With gear, what are you currently using? And I'm really curious as to what you're using for processing, because software's now become more important almost than photography, than the camera and the lenses now, in terms of how your work ends up looking.
So, to be honest, I don't really want to spend more than 5 minutes processing an image. Even though sometimes I do, I end up dodging and burning some areas sometimes, but then mostly it's just 5 minutes tops, and it's really interesting because a lot of photographers swear by Lightroom, and I've never learned Lightroom at all. I tried using it, but it's so hard. I used to use Photoshop before that, but now I'm in love with Snapseed. So at the moment, my go-to editing setup is like I download my raw files into my iPad. I convert the raw files into JPEG using an iPad raw converter app. It's called Pixelmator Photo, and then I use Snapseed to do whatever processing I need to turn it into black and white in my style. And yeah, that's and it's very mobile, so I can use my iPhone or my iPad. It doesn't really matter.
Excellent. What projects are you currently working on?
As a photographer, none, because my university is taking a lot of my energy. So, but I am working on a project for my university, which is completely based on photography. So I don't know why I said none, because that's still my work.
And also, you're still posting photos, street photos of Melbourne now.
Yeah, that's something I do. I do a lot, and I don't want to stop doing. And so for my university project, I'm working on making photography more tactile. So how can I make people touch my work? And how can I make my work inviting enough for them to actually physically engage with my work? And it's a really simple idea, but I'm finding it really hard to implement it in practice. But I'm still working on it, and I've got some time left to do it.
Your long-term goals as a photographer?
I want to keep doing what I do. The first priority is I don't want to start shooting weddings. I don't want to do that, or real estate. I don't want to do that. I mean, in the end, capitalism mostly wins, and then you have to end up doing a lot of things that you don't want to. But I'm really holding photography dear to my heart, and I'm going to fight for it. But I hope to show my work to more people, and I look forward to having more exhibitions in Australia and getting more shows and exposure.
Thank you very much for being on the tape.
Thank you, Gary.
Cheers.